Okay, guys, welcome to another edition of the Detour. I'm joined, as always, by four-time National Road Race champion, Johnny Trevorrow. Johnny, we say it every episode, but we've got another special episode, given that for the last 2 weeks, we've had all these comments and opinions on how the sport should be run, but when we break it down, we really don't know what we're talking about, do we?
Well, you don't, but I do.
Well, you think you do. You've got some good opinions. But I thought it'd be better if we actually got someone on that has got a bit more experience and a bit more knowledge on these areas, Iffy.
Good idea. Taught her everything she knows.
Oh, that's a big call. We're speaking of Tracey Gaudry. Tracey, what is your official title at the moment? Because I got on your LinkedIn page and I still got a bit of a headache. I can't dissect it. You've got your finger in a few pies.
Thank you. Yeah, Dan. And John taught me a few of the things that I know, and maybe we can dissect what John taught me and what I learned elsewhere during this session. But for the purposes of today's session, firstly, it's great to be on Detour. My official capacity is as a lifelong cycling participant and enthusiast. But in terms of formal roles, I am a member of the UCI Management Committee and the president of the UCI Women's Commission, and also the president of Oceania Cycling, which means we play a significant role, Oceania Cycling Confederation, in overseeing and promoting cycling in this part of the world, encouraging more cycling here to place more riders on the world stage and do as much as we can to bring as much cycling to these shores as possible. So there's a bit in there, Dan. Sometimes your head does hurt from the volume, but I think one of the things that I'm sure John and I share, and you do as well, Dan, is this sport is in our DNA, and the more we can give back to the sport and the more we can contribute to its success, the better. And that's what all these roles are about.
Obviously,
Exactly right.
The biggest pending issue is this COVID-19 outbreak. And, there's stories, obviously, with EF, Jonathan Vaughters coming out and saying, look, he advised that they stop the Giro on the next rest day. Their riders have come out and said, no, well, they're keen to race. There's issues with the bubble. We'll kick things off with the current status at the Giro. What are your thoughts on how the bubble's working and should the race continue in the current circumstances?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And when you think about the work we have as UCI, we govern over the sport of cycling. Our role is to make sure that the combination of governance, the organisers, the teams, the riders, and then the local regions who are responsible for how the race is managed through, start, duration, and finish of each stage. For us, the most important thing is the safety protocols in the race and around the race are upheld. And that's the responsibility of the Giro to work on with the local organisers and the teams. So whilst everyone is abiding by the protocols, we're good. And I think as you understand, if any part of the system says, we don't need to apply that stringency, that's when things can go wrong. But what we also want to recognise is the teams and the riders have a lot to race for. They're salvaging a season that we've done, collectively a great job in keeping going. There are only a few races left in the season, and everyone's working very, very hard in an increasingly COVID risky environment to keep the race going all the way through to Milan. So we're doing the very best we can.
Iffy?
Well, I want a couple of things. Firstly, before we get into all of that, I just wanted to let our many listeners and viewers know a bit about the background of Tracey. And as I mentioned, I jokingly said I taught her everything I know, which isn't much. But in the early days when I had a bike shop and I moved down to Geelong, Tracey was just a youngster coming into the sport, and she used to work a little bit part-time for me in the bike shop and help me out more than anything. But, she was also an elite women cyclist. She competed in the Olympics in 96 and 2000, Commonwealth Games in 98, Australian national champion in that time. And she was also, at the height of her career, ranked number 3 in the world. So, Tracey knows what she's talking about from a competitor's point of view, and now with her long history, she was vice president of the UCI just a couple of years back as well. So very involved in all of the running of the UCI at men's and women's level. So we'll go there. And over the last week. I know that we've been looking at the whole COVID situation since the two teams had to leave and all of that, and we've probably been a little bit hard on the Giro I have in my thoughts. But I've looked back over the last 24 hours and looked at all of the emails coming back and forth, and I'm starting to realise that the sport is trying its hardest to get this right, because the sport needs these races to continue, but it can't be done at the detriment of the health of not just the riders in our bubble, of the public either. And what I really like is the way it's turning around, is the way that the Vuelta now is setting these limits. They're really encouraging, as is the Tour of Flanders, which is on tomorrow, the people to stay at home, watch it on telly. Don't come there. If it's coming through your town, stand on the side of the road, watch them go by, but not encouraging people to come from other towns to mix with the people in that town. So the latest messaging is very, very good. And if that can be really adhered to, then it can continue. But it's all going to depend on how they're doing a lot more testing. What's going to happen with the final results that come out in a couple of hours' time for all the testing they've done the last couple of days. But I can see a real positive side to it. I just wanted to get that in because we've been a bit negative over the last couple of days.
Yeah, well, it's good you fessed up to that, John. You're negative most of the time. But Tracey, is one of the biggest issues from when we chatted to Matt White is the uncontrollables, in that you're relying on the general public and you're relying on staff at hotels and so forth to do the right thing, that don't fall under the onus of this racing bubble where they're drilled in. These are the right things and these are the right protocols. Is that the biggest issue you think that is currently faced by the teams?
That's one of the major issues in Europe, and I'm assuming most of the audience for Detour is an Australian audience, and as you know, we're operating in an environment where there are very, very firm restrictions. I'm living in Melbourne right now, and so we're currently in a 5-kilometre bubble, and what you can and can't do is quite clear. In Europe, from region to region, there are different restrictions. From country to country, and there's not the same level of formalised policed or enforced restriction in the community as there is in Australia. So that is a significant risk if riders are operating in a bubble, but the extent of their bubble isn't so enforced. And that's an important thing, is the teams will do the best they can. The riders clearly know not only is their health at stake, but their family's health and the rest of the community. But importantly, and John, an important element is the reputation of the sport. The sport needs to continue. However, the sport also must show its social conscience and show that it's playing its role as a member of the community. So Dan, it comes back to as I mentioned at the outset, there's the UCI, there's the organisers, there's the teams, there's the riders. But there's also the role of the communities and the local regions in their message. And so, John, that's exactly right. How do we ensure that every member of that community, whether they're a hotelier or a cafe or a member of the community, what's their role to play in keeping the race alive?
Is there set protocols that are laid out? Because it sounds like there's different processes with RCS and ASO, particularly from when the riders finish the stage to getting to the team buses. ASO have a very, it's roped off, it's corridor, there's no access for fans, whereas our RCS has different protocols where fans are getting very close to the riders and so forth. Is there a set protocol that is mapped out by the UCI or that's consistent across the board, or is it up to the race organisers with sort of grey areas like that?
Yeah, the protocols that we set in terms of bubbles, and for those who've got a more scientific mind, a Venn diagram where there can be an overlap of different group bubbles, such as teams and riders with media, for example, or with the race organisation, depend very much on the environment in that community. So, for example, if you're looking at what was happening in the Tour de France, and then you could see the difference between the stages, the mountain stages and the final stage in Paris. Then when we saw the Road World Championships, which, John, when you're talking about what cycling's doing, the unfortunate cancellation of the Road World Championships in Switzerland, but for UCI to work with Italy for them to take place, the protocols were so strict in terms of interaction. Then when you've got the Giro, we're reliant on the local regions and their protocols, and then how the race organizer applies the local region's restrictions to the race. So, Dan, that's where the differences lie in terms of the local region and what the race needs to do.
Mm.
It's very tricky. How we or the separation of the different parts of the race from the community.
Yeah. I hear that the Giro has implemented some stricter rules at the finish areas now, so that what you were just talking about, Dan, isn't happening anymore. The riders do get a free go to their buses without any fans getting involved. And I noticed that they're stepped up the testing, considerably in the last few days. So everyone's understanding that this is it's a moving problem, and it's this terrible virus is just so demanding, and so no one really understands it completely. So they really are stepping up. There's no doubt about that.
There is. Sorry, Dan.
You're right, Tracey.
The other thing the other thing that it's not just cycling's facing, but that countries and governments are facing is, as you said, John. The virus is. We're dealing with change every day. We're dealing in Europe with growing cases every day, more than 100,000 cases across Europe in a given day. And so we're dealing with an evolving virus going into, we're in autumn going into winter time. So as the Giro has been taking place, 2 weeks in, it feels like 2 years in terms of the effort each day. 2 weeks in, every day you're dealing with a new set of circumstances. And that's why you see the organisers adapting each day, tightening the restrictions. And, as far as UCI is concerned, it's important that we make them as tight as possible to enable the race to continue in a safe bubble.
We heard an interview with Caleb Ewan the other day, and at the end, the interviewer was asking him, are you going to head back to Australia at the end of the year? And he just flat out said, no, it's not a possibility with the forced quarantine. And the general vibe from the riders that we've spoken to is not many of them want to travel or can travel at the end of the year. We're only 3 months away from the summer of cycling firing up in Australia. Is this going to be a big concern for races like Cadell's and Tour Down Under and so forth?
Dan and John, you would have heard Hataf and others talking in recent weeks. It's a 24/7 dialogue between the UCI, the Cadell Evans Great Ocean Road Race, the Tour Down Under, both the men's and women's races, the state governments and the Australian government on what are the requirements in order to have the race go ahead. That includes Australian quarantining and travel exemptions. That includes what's the state of play going to be in South Australia come January, what's the state of play going to be in Victoria, and should teams be in a position to come into the country, what's the quarantine requirement, what's the bubble that they operate in, and then how can the race take place. So there is work going 24/7 to ensure that the environment is safe for riders, but also respects the community restrictions that are in place in the country. So that's live. We can say that it's a 24/7 exercise literally right now. And as you know, we're 3 months away, and you've just said, less than 3 months away. I'm just looking at my calendar. The every day that goes by, there's a different set of circumstances. The challenge we have is you'd like to have more time to be able to make the most informed real-time decisions about restrictions. But you also have the situation, as I'm sure both of you and our viewers are very aware, is that teams are making decisions about their early season calendar, and there's that tension between we need more time to make decisions about what's viable, but the teams also need to lock their calendars in as we're confirming riders, particularly the women's teams, So we're in the next, in the next weeks are crucial for UCI, the organisers, and the local regions.
I know that if you had asked me 2 weeks ago, because I, good mates with Stewie, and I talk with him, and he's always giving me an update on how he's going, talking with the teams, and there was a real positive feedback coming from the teams. And when I speak to the riders, different guys, 2 weeks ago, it was all of the Australian bus riders were looking forward to coming back to Australia, where there isn't really a problem with the pandemic, and to put up with the quarantine situation. And it was but I'm getting especially the last week, when anyone I spoke to, it's not the same positive feedback I'm getting. It's going to 2 weeks of quarantine and then having to go into it when I go back. It all seems a bit too hard. I'm getting a vibe that it's going to be a lot more difficult than what I thought.
So, John, there's a couple of things there. One, the situation in Europe has declined in terms of the impact of coronavirus. There are more cases every day, so there is a reawakening in Europe of the impact of coronavirus. The corollary is, we're living in Australia, which is probably one of the safest countries in the world because of the restrictions that have been in place for coming on 7 months now. Would it be fair to say? And so the irony is that coming to Australia is probably one of the safest places in the world to come to. And going through 2 weeks of quarantine where, the effort is how can a quarantine environment enable the riders to train in South Australia safely in their own bubbles, they're actually going to be in safe, healthy hands. And one of the risks is on the way back to Europe, what are the quarantine restrictions that may or may not be in place by then? And I think, John, some of that nervousness is the nervousness about the unknown. Let's not forget that, in 3 weeks before the Road World Championships in Switzerland, it was cancelled, and we were able to host the World Championships on the day in which it was scheduled in another country. So I think if there's anything to be said about the resolve of cycling and the stakeholders, is where there's a will, there's a way. And until there's no option left and we've exhausted all options, we're gunning towards the Tour Down Under and the Cadel Evans Gradation Road Race taking their place as the start of the World Tour season and the Women's World Tour season.
Yeah, two parts. Firstly, the UCI and the Italian organisers have to be really commended for that World Championship, to put that on that quickly, and it was brilliant. Really, really well done. Yeah, but the riders I'm speaking to, none of them are worrying about the pandemic as far as the contagious side of it coming to Australia. It is the quarantine, and more the quarantine going back, where they've been pretty well told that they're going to have a pretty good setup in Adelaide to let them go to quarantine and be able to train and be safe. But going back, it's not the same guarantees going, and they're different countries with different rules, as you say. And to me, it's just putting a big question mark over the whole thing.
The difficulty is, and certainly we, UCI isn't responsible, cannot make the decisions on behalf of the countries of origin for the riders and their return country. That is an unknown. And as you've seen in Europe with races being cancelled and being able to go ahead, it comes down to the regulations and the restrictions in the country. So we acknowledge that that's a difficulty. Our ability to maintain currency over those regulations is an important one. We're in working with Tour Down Under and the Cadel Evans Gradation Road Race, I just want to also commend the spirit of collaboration between the two organisers and the two states. It's fantastic to see. John, you're right, that is an issue because every day what's happening in Europe and also America and other parts of the world, we are dependent upon unknowns in January. We can only hope that those countries go into winter and the restrictions enable the caseload to go down, which means the quarantining process is going to be a manageable process for riders to come back to.
Well, my last one to throw at you. Sorry to jump in, Dan, but
I'm used to it, mate.
So in the past, the Tour Down Under is being a World Tour event, the teams have to ride it, and not so much. Even though Cadell's race is a World Tour event, it hasn't been mandatory. Is it still going to be mandatory from the UCI that teams ride Tour Down Under?
I'm not in a position to respond directly to that question. However, John, you did right in that the Tour Down Under is one of the before the expansion of the World Tour 5 or so years ago is a mandatory event. What I can say is that UCI is working with the Tour Down Under and Cadel Evans race to find every way to remove constraints for teams coming to Australia, and to remove to take what we call derogations is the official term we use, is to enable a smooth passage for the event to take place. We understand that for the economy of cycling around the world, the investment into cycling of the local and regional governments, whether it be a country or whether it be a state like South Australia or Victoria, that to enable those events to go ahead ensures that those investments can remain. So we're working with Tour Down Under as we speak on all things in terms of teams, riders, quarantine, mandatory participation, where they stay, how we would have safe passage from South Australia to Geelong, to Victoria and Geelong, as you know, and those decisions are being made on a daily basis.
Geez, it's been doom and gloom a bit on this show so far, but we might as well just get it all out of the system. Worst case scenario, say it explodes in Europe. We had 31,000 cases in France 2 days ago, 12,000 in Spain. Say it looks like in a month's time, it's very, very unlikely that many, if any, at all, teams will come out for Down Under. What's the latest, given how much logistics and planning goes into these events, that you have to make a call? Like, is that come from the UCI, or will it have to come from the event itself? And how much time? I know you said 3 weeks out from the Worlds, you could pre-plan and do another event. I mean, obviously, Down Under's a different kettle of fish.
Yeah, Dan, and it's pretty apparent to the viewers and yourselves and us that for one thing, to be able to reposition the World Championships the way we were able to was dependent on a number of circumstances. First and foremost, the fact that most of the riders who would be in a position to be competing in the World Championships, the elite riders, the elite men and women, were already based in Europe. Okay, so let's be honest that when you saw the World Championships take place, three and a half weeks ago, we made a call that to go ahead when they were cancelled in Switzerland, that in order to go ahead, it would only be feasible to stage the elite men and the elite women's races, that it would not be feasible to be staging under 23 and junior categories, because most of those, particularly junior categories, would be national teams based in their own country and coming in. Yeah. So it stands to reason that it's a very different and more complex proposition to start the season where a lot of the riders are based in Europe, in their home country, to start the season in another continent. So then the reality is there are quite a few more hoops to jump through. The decision will come down to the intersection between the latest date by which teams can get their calendar set, and the date by which the Australia as a country, but also the states, need to make that call. And as you would understand, the ability for those two pieces to come together is a day-by-day proposition over the next week's month, literally.
Yep. Shout out to Wendy Superfan. I stole that question from her. What's the latest date to either go ahead or cancel races? I just polished it up a bit.
Hi, Wendy. Please, being a super fan.
Yeah. Now, Ian Thomas had a question. He said, Tracey, I hear that Paula Carr has pulled the sponsorship from their women's team. Any info on this?
There's no info I'm able to give you at this point in time. What I can share is that the process for the women's world teams for viewers is this year, ironically, was the first year, and it's been many years of build-up. So whilst we're talking about a lot of complexity at this year because of coronavirus, let's remember that over the past 6 to 7 years, UCI has been working closely with organisers and teams and riders to build a strengthened women's world calendar. This year was the marking of the establishment of the first ever year of women's truly professional teams, the women's world teams. We had 8 women's world teams, and then we had the second classification of women's UCI teams called women's continental teams. And we're at the process right now of receiving applications for next year's to become world teams for next year or remain, as well as applications for continental teams. So at this point in time, we're working with teams on an individual basis on their capacity to remain as world teams, step up to a world team, or register as a continental team. And by the middle of November, we will be able to share the outcome of those negotiations and the team's applications.
Is that one of the other big problems? We've talked about it so many times on this show, is the sustainability of teams in professional cycling. And you add COVID to it, there's sponsors that just don't have the money, and it's unlike most other sports where there's this history, there's this narrative. Teams are folding and coming and going all the time. Is that one of the biggest challenges the sport's got moving forward, is this sustainability with the model?
Dan, it's a really important conversation that we're having, and if we were not experiencing 7 months, 8 months, 9 months of coronavirus impact on the globe, we'd still be having this conversation, wouldn't we? We'd be looking at the sustainability of cycling as a global sport and as a commercially strong sport. Let's be honest, cycling is commercially not a powerhouse global sport such as football, FIFA and other major sports. So we've got a way to go, and ironically, this year cycling and UCI have been working on a women's model that builds much more sustainability in the system, where there's collective input and collective return on investment. Coronavirus has thrown all that out of the window. And so what we've needed to do is work very closely with teams on what's the minimum viable requirements for them to stay involved in the sport. Let's just shout out to those investors in cycling, and we've got our homegrown, one of the most significant, not only investors but commitment to the sport in Jerry Ryan and his family. We all know that we need to build stronger commercial viability. We need to ensure that the viewership and the broadcast revenues are able to be part of the distribution of wealth through the sport, and through that will bring in more commercial sponsors that have a multi-year investment. So those types of models are being worked on in the background. This year they haven't been able to be strengthened as much as we would like because of, every day we're trying to keep the sport happening, let alone the growth that we had otherwise intended for this year.
And is the biggest challenge with that, if you were like the NBA or you were like F1 and all the big races fell under the one banner, so then you could do what they do and it's all on your mobile phone and you buy like a yearly pass and all that sort of stuff, that'd be ideal. But you're not dealing with that. You're dealing with a company called ASO who own the biggest race that's 80% of the revenue. Then you have to negotiate with them. Now, they probably don't want to play ball, and this has been a long-running battle for 10, 15 years. I think the biggest hurdle, obviously, is how do you sort of collectively come under one global banner, which is the sport that we all love, so that it benefits the sponsors, the fans, and it sort of has one more collective vision.
There are many ways to establish sporting products, as you know, and in many sports. And in Australia, we've got the AFL. We've got league sports. In America, you've got the baseball league. And those types of sport models are what we'd call a closed model, where there is a set number of teams, and they're within a system where there is a formalised commercial structure for the whole league. And cycling doesn't have that same structure. As you know, there's a relegation and demotion system in place for world teams, and teams can come in and go on a restricted basis. And so when you've got a different product, we need to consider how we can commercialise that. And so, the World Championships the UCI owns, the World Tour the UCI owns the brand of the World Tour. And so commercialising that product as the World Tour is an important element for us. And how do we work with existing organisers? As you said, the ASO has ownership over a number of the events in the World Tour. And how do we build a model that helps the pie get bigger, and so that distribution in the pie benefits everybody in it? And that's an important piece. And that's why we're working quite closely with the Women's World Tour, which is newer and doesn't have the same type of established ownership and sharing. So it's about firstly creating a pie that can grow, versus pulling it apart and rebuilding it. Because what we don't want to do as a sport is pull it apart to rebuild it. We actually want to create a model that can grow based on what we have already.
It's great to hear you say all of those things, Tracey, because it's so exactly it. With the women's cycling, you've got a chance to build something from the ground up. And I'm sure, and what you're saying is exactly spot on, in that there is so much more money available in the TV rights if it was a concerted joint effort from everyone, from UCI, from us, RCS, ASO. If everyone was together in this, and the pro teams, then there is so much more money available in the whole television package. It has to become a situation where these World Tour teams aren't reliant on sponsorship for 90% of their survival. Actually, nearly it's 100%. So that's got to change, and it's got to be something like 50% of their costs have got to come from their media assets.
Things do need to change, and certainly this year has not helped the progress that we in terms of all parts of the system were intending for. However, when we look at the women's model, by way of example, I'm sure on Detour there was a conversation several weeks ago around the women's Giro and it being not awarded World Tour status next year. One of the things that I was putting my other hat on just for a moment, the UCI is doing, is that to strengthen the Women's World Tour, to have it as a commercially viable whole product of events, is that a minimum standard is that every race must have live broadcast. So we're building the minimum standards to attract more sponsorship, to ensure that every race reaches the eyeballs of viewers around the world, which means commercially there's greater appetite for investing in the sport and in women's cycling if those investors know it's going to reach more lounge rooms and more consumers of the products that they might be sponsoring through that platform.
Tracey, you've been involved with the UCI for quite some time now. What are you most proud of in the time that you've been there and the influence that you've had to create some of these changes?
Thanks, Dan. The first thing I'd say is there's not one thing that anyone does on their own or can say it's proud of because I did this or they did that. It's the ability to bring everything you've got to bear to help build the case for change. And for those who followed my journey as a rider, John, and based in Geelong, and by the way, Geelong's such a great training ground for cycling and regional Australia, is the ability to be at the table of UCI, and I was elected in November 2012. We're coming up 8 years next month. The ability to be at the decision-making table of the UCI at a really critical time for the sport. We were going through significant reputational crisis in the sport through the doping crises. The sport was professionalising. Women's cycling, sadly, was going backwards in terms of the global reach and participation. And it was the ability to be at the table at the time when there was a lot of change required, and to be able to work with the management committee, have enough currency of knowledge of what was going on in the peloton. I'd been retired only a decade, and to help improve the ethics of the sport, to help bring gender diversity into the sport, and to help improve the governance of the sport. And the viewers may not know this, but of all of the international federations, UCI is in the top half dozen federations in the world for its overall governance, which means its good management, its role as a corporate citizen for the sport, and its contribution to the Olympic agenda. So we've now got equal number of events, men and women, in the Olympic Games. We've now got a women's world tour. We've now got a governance model, which for viewers, for the first time next year, when the continents have their election and the UCI has its election, there will be a gender quota in the election process. And so we're in a position where cycling is now demonstrating that it's embracing gender equality. It's also embracing diversity. It's got a very strong code of ethics. And globally, we're reaching more parts of the world than we have ever before. We've got now 198 nations who are part of the UCI. And Oceania is one of those continents where we've grown from 4 countries to 10 countries who are part of the membership of UCI in just 8 years. So there's a bit there, Dan. We could go on for a while. It's been a significant effort over 8 years, but my role is to help start those conversations about positive change. The rest is the collective effort of getting there.
And congratulations for that for that positive change. So I think this is a really good time. Let's talk about tomorrow. Tomorrow we've got the Ronde van Vlaanderen, Tour of Flanders, and one of the beautiful things that's happened this year,
there we go,
is that exactly as you were talking about just then, Tracey, is that we've been watching the women with their classics. Now that the Tour of Flanders, it was going to be the Paris-Roubaix. Unfortunately, they missed out in their first Paris-Roubaix this year. But it's wonderful that we've got Giro de Lombardia, all these wonderful classics that have been going for a long time in the men's. Suddenly, they're the classics for the women too, because of the events that they are. And tomorrow, I'm really looking forward to it, because we've got some Aussies who are going to be right in the mix there. So I think we can start on to the Ronde van Vlaanderen, Tour of Flanders.
Ronde van Vlaanderen, a fantastic race for any Aussies who've ever spent any time in Belgium. Australians and Belgians have a great relationship. We've got a similar culture. We're have a bit more fun when life can be too serious. But John and Dan, I have got the start list for both the men's and women's races here. We've also got the calendar for the World Tour for men and women, and sadly, there's been a few crossouts over the last weeks, hasn't there, in terms of the amazing ability of UCI to work with the race organisers who originally have all those World Tour Classic races in the European springtime, to be able to find a way to bring them back to life in autumn, the European autumn, between August and October, only for half of them not to be able to take place because of the impacts of coronavirus and the country-by-country restrictions. But we've got Tour of Flanders tomorrow, Ronde van Vlaanderen, depending on which language you'd like to speak. Fantastic culture and a fantastic race. Are we talking women's first, John, or men? Which way?
Number one, women first.
Let's go women's first. What a season it's been when you think of only been, half a dozen World Tour events, starting off with, when you think about Classic in Spain, we weren't able to have Amstel Gold. We were able to have Liège. We were able to have Gent-Wevelgem, and now we've got Flanders. I just want to call out, before we go to who's my outright favourite, I reckon you're going to probably ask that question. I just want to call out for the Australian fans that it's going to be one of Gracie Elvin's very last professional races. And as an Australian rider who has had her whole career with Mitchelton Scott, her whole professional career, if there's any way for her to go out on a high, it would be to win this race. She has placed very well in it years gone by. It suits her style.
Second, I think, didn't she? Yeah.
She's the only Australian female to be on the podium, John.
Yep.
You know that.
I knew that.
You're calling each other out now. It suits her style. As you know, she announced her retirement a bit over a week ago. And I would say she'll be doing the very best she can, and the team would be delighted to see her win. So Mitchelton Scott's got one of the strongest teams in the race. I just
want a shout out to Gracie. Actually, John sent me a podcast that I listened to on a walk this morning, and it was one of the most raw, honest interviews I think I've ever heard with a professional athlete. And Lauren Rowney did the interview with another lady. I can't remember her name, but it was fantastic. You got to check it out. Do you remember the name of it, John? It's a cycling tips one, but it was staggering. And she just opened up about all the pressures that she has as an athlete. Obviously, for the women's tour, it is very difficult given the financial situation for a lot of these riders. They're on minimum wage and the sacrifices they have to make. And then she talked about the breakdown of her marriage, and was just open and honest about the whole situation. I thought it was unbelievable. So chapeau to Gracie for that interview. It was fantastic.
And while we're talking about Gracie, before you move on, I just want to say I was talking to Jerry Ryan just the other day, and Gracie's name come up, and he said he got the most beautiful letter from Gracie, and parts of that are actually on the Greene's website, but a personal letter to Jerry. He said it was beautiful and quite moving. So she's a special lady.
She is. I'm just going to send one more, share one more accolade and well-deserved one about Gracie. Is that not only has she been a wonderful ambassador for the sport on the bike, by her honesty, Dan, as you've said, she's sharing what it means to be a professional athlete, and it's not easy. But she also has played a very significant role in the establishment of a women's riders representation group called Cyclist Alliance, and that group represents the interests of women professional riders. And she was one of the founding directors of that while she was racing. So she was a representative in the peloton. That shows a lot of courage, and it shows a lot of insight, and also the ability to perform at your best whilst you're thinking about the well-being of others. That says something about Gracie, and I certainly wish her all the best this weekend and in her final races. But she's going to have a lot of success in life off the bike because of her character.
Oh yeah, for sure. She's really, really switched on and articulate how she speaks. It's great.
And as you mentioned, Mitchelton Scott team has got so many avenues with Annemiek, with Grace Brown being in scintillating form, second in Liège and winning the Brabantse Pijl, or however you say that one. And she's a big chance on this course. And of course, Amanda Spratt is back and in form. So they've got a 3 or even 4-pronged attack.
And then you've got Sarah Roy, who's doing really, really well at this back end of the season as well. Well, actually, the shortened season. I shouldn't say back end because there wasn't a middle season. So I'd say Mitchelton Scott have got so many cards to play, and the course is really suitable for a whole team effort, because it's one of those courses and one of those races where it's about the opportunist who can get away and win. If there's a sprint finish, they've got options there. So Mitchelton Scott's going to be a team to watch. Let's also look at some of the other season favourites who just keep coming back time after time. Obviously, Bulls Dolman, Van der Breggen, of course. Jolyon Dore. Amy Peters has played a really important role through the shortened season. And one of the other teams that, I have a soft spot for in terms of Tracey Gaudry, like Lizzie Dagnan, who's come back after having her first child, but she's got Ellen Van Dyke and Longo Borghini on her team. It's just such an amazing field this year when you think about riders who are at the front end of their career. You've got Kasia Niewiadoma, you've got Lisa Brunner, you've got Cecilia Ludwig, for those who are looking at accents, who is the life of the party in the bunch. And guess what? Marianne Vos, who continues to shine, multiple championship. I remember in the early 2010s, 2013, 14, 15, she had a few quiet years, and look, she's coming back again now. There's, all of those riders could be on the podium tomorrow night.
Yeah, it's going to be a bloody good race, that's for sure.
So let's move on to the men's. You got you got it all in front of you. We're going to have another amazing race in the men as well.
Well, the punters think it's down to two. Van der Poel and Wout van Aert, they're both $3.25 favourites. And then, the rest is you pretty much throw a blanket over it.
I reckon Alaphilippe will win it. So there you go.
Oh, right. He's $11, John.
Yeah, I'll be putting your money on Alaphilippe. Unless he puts his hands up too early.
He throws his hands up, yeah. Or chops him in the sprint.
Whatever. Yeah.
Well, Wout van Aert will be pretty hungry. He's just did an amazing role in at this stage in his road career. Let's not lose sight of people like Matteo Trentin, Sepp van Mark. Alaphilippe, I think, will be pretty hungry, but he's already had a win as a world champion, so that's interesting. Mads Pedersen would be up there, and
great form. Yep.
So there's Bosenhagen. There's probably 8 to 10 who would be in that mix, and as you've seen in the last classics, the favoured ones come to the front, and it's been an absolute tussle, and we hope and expect it's going to be like that again tomorrow.
So are they restricting obviously crowds for Flanders, because that was obviously what it was known for, all the Belgies up there on the beers and with their flags out and stuff. Are they limiting all of that at this race?
The messaging is all stay home, watch from home, keep the race alive by staying home, keep everybody healthy by staying home. I'll have to take on notice what the actual race restriction is around the footprint of the race, but certainly keeping everybody away from the race is going to be the safest way for the riders in the community, and we can expect that to be the case tomorrow.
Interestingly, they made a decision, because there's some slight changes to the course, not to publicise the actual route of the Tour of Flanders. They have kept it until the race starts, because they don't want people to go out there. They've actually said that. We're going to keep it quiet. If it's coming through your town, fine, stand there and watch it go past your town, but don't go drive anywhere to go and watch it. But while we're on that, I know it's been a real struggle to get races on, but gee, the racing has been brilliant. Tour de France, Giro, all the classics. Every day, we're just shaking our head with just how good the racing has been, men's and women's. It's been the best season of racing, actual racing, I've ever seen.
It's been astounding, and the irony is when you spread the races that we've had in the last 3 months, and I'm looking at both of the World Tour calendars here, you spread them across the whole season. We've also had the situation where you've had, with the Giro going on at the moment, you've had the one-day classics in the envelope within that as well. And so it's required teams to decide which is the team for the classics and which is the team for the three-week stage races. And within each combination, we've had that strong racing. It's almost like every single time, particularly the one-day races and the classics, every single time every rider and every team gets on that start line and races as if it's the last race they're going to race for the season. And that's what's bringing that extra energy to it, is we're going to treat this as our opportunity, because we don't know when the next one's coming. And there is also that freshness as people are coming into an interesting part of form at the back end of the year, when they're normally coming out of form because they're about to close. So it's quite an interesting combination of how people have been able to build form quickly, and to be able to basically going at 100% every time they put their foot on that start line.
Exactly right. And, you know, it's a bit like boys or kids in the lolly shop. By restricting them, by actually stopping them from racing for all that time, which has never, ever happened before, they've suddenly, they realise how much they wanted to race. And once they got the okay, bang, they raced and they haven't stopped.
On the flip side, you got a lot of riders that are going, it's bloody October. I'm over this. I should be on holidays. So it sort of goes both ways. But
they're the ones out the back, mate.
I've always said, Tracey, shorter stages in the Grand Tours. You know, these stages where it's 230, 240, keep them short. UCI should bring in a rule, 160K max. That's it. So it's on from the gun. John loves the traditional side of things.
No, I've got to mix it up. No, they're doing that now, though. I mean, they're shortening. I think the Giro's got a few more stages over 200 in the Tour de France. Tour de France did it spot on this year, and I think that's going to be the format. Every now and again, you can work a 220K in, but they've worked out that the stages around the 160, 170 kilometres are producing sensational racing. So, and I think that's going to be the way it moves.
And just one other thing, Tracey, you're talking about Gracie Elvin's, how she started the Riders' Union for the women. There's been a lot of talk as well for the men's. They're trying to form this union as well. Sam Bewley's come on the show and gave us a bit of insight, and the frustrations, I think, with the current setup where they want it like one rider, one vote. What's the current status with all of that sort of stuff?
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go back to the length of the races in just a moment, because that's a really, really interesting and exciting conversation. Within the men's racing, there's the CPA, the Professional Cyclist Alliance, there's the teams union, and then there's the organisers group, and they all come together to join the Professional Cycling Council with the UCI, which makes decisions around the construct of the men's World Tour and men's racing. Within women's racing, because we've built the World Tour, and the development of women's cycling is enabling the system to consider what's the best way of supporting the interests of the riders, the teams, and the organisers. Those representative groups are still forming. And so as we talked about, John, there's an opportunity with the burgeoning development of women's cycling to consider what's optimum versus what have we already got. And as you know, there's often seemed to be more opportunity in building something new than breaking something apart and putting it back together. So with the men's peloton and professional men's cycling, it's appropriate at that point in time. The cohorts in cycling say what's best for us, and so the conversation around what's the best model and makeup for the CPA, the Professional Cyclists Alliance, is a live conversation. What's the best way for the teams to be represented is an important conversation. What's the best way for the organisers to be represented is another important conversation. And so UCI can help facilitate those conversations. However, we also need to allow and support each of those cohorts to make decisions about what's the smartest way for them to be represented in those collective discussions. So it's a live conversation. We welcome those discussions, because at the end of the day, every rider, going back to the riders, every rider needs to be confident that they're being represented appropriately by the body that's acting on their behalf.
Yep, I reckon Bules would be happy with that answer.
I think so. Yep, fantastic.
Sure.
So I reckon we have a little bit of a dabble into the Giro, the last night's stage, and then what's coming up tomorrow. What do you reckon, Dan?
Yeah, why not? Ulysses, he mopped them up. John, did you predict? Who did you tip? I don't think you did. I don't think you tipped Ulysses.
No, I picked Damar. I thought he might have got back on, and it was it was an interesting bike race. So you had a break go early that never really got well established, and then the GC riders got involved. Bora put the pressure on because it was dead pancake flat for 3/4 of the bike race, and then two Cat 4s near the end. On the first Cat 4, Bora put the pressure on, but Damar was only just off the back, and he got back. On the second one, the GC riders took over. They caught the break, and Sagan got spat out the back himself, and so had Damar behind Sagan, but they never ended up in the bike race. GC riders then went for it. Ulysses was only one with a bit of speed amongst all the GC guys, really, and so even though Ulysses won it, the pink jersey, Maeda, or however we say his name, was brilliant. I only beat him by half a wheel, and fantastic. And just back there in 10th place, Jai Hindley, who was really stepping up. He's 7th overall now, and looking very, very good. Youngster who won the Jacob Hurlson Tour last January.
And there's really not much to talk about the time trial. Let's be honest. There's a few bit of a lumps at the start. There's a Cat 4, a bit lumpy towards the end. But if you look at the odds, I mean, Garner's going to mop this up. I mean, Rowan Dennis, he's if he has a good set of legs, Garner's obviously gone pretty deep in this Giro iffy, so that might come into account. And instead of winning by 10 minutes, he might win by 5. So, He'll win it by, as I said in the prologue. No one will get within 20 seconds. No one will get within 30 seconds of him here, I don't think. So you can put, unless he has a puncture or something go wrong, I can't see anyone beating him in this one. But watch that young Tour leader. He finished second in the prologue to Gaudry, and he is in very good form. So he'll be the only one who could maybe up, a bit like Tour de France. What happened on that second last mountain? No one would have picked it, but I think young Yoe Almeida is looking more and more a real possibility to win this Giro. All right, well there you go. You've heard it. Johnny, do you want to send a bit of a cheerio to Jerry's company, Mitchelton? Do you find us well?
Does Jerry own that company, does he?
I think he's got a fair fingernail of it.
Well, okay. Well, I'm going to come out and say from the heart, I love the Mitchelton Winery. The whole setup there. I do spend a bit of time up there. We've got my little cabin around the corner, but I just love going in there because it's just such a beautiful setup. You've been there yourself, Tracey. You know how gorgeous it is. We used to run the ride there, which was Amy Gillett. Federation was involved with for a little while you were involved. But it is just such a glorious place. And as I say, you can experience the history, the beauty and the serenity of the Goulburn Valley. I mean, it's become the go-to place for weddings and special functions, birthdays and stuff, because you sit out there on the gardens overlooking the beautiful Goulburn River and then go into beautiful function rooms. It's amazing. That viewing platform, jump in the lift, go up to the top there. Down below, if you go push the other button and go downstairs into the catacombs down below, there's the most amazing Aboriginal art gallery, which is world class. It is staggering. The hotel, as you see there, beautiful views out both sides, 2 levels. Go into the spa, quiet the mind, unwind the body, rediscover your balance in a setting of peace and harmony. So, and then if that doesn't do it for you, duck into the cellar door and get some beautiful Mitchelton Heathcote Shiraz, which is my favourite, and book a wine tasting. It is a wonderful day. So when you go to Mitchelton Winery, go there for the day. It is something special.
Tell them John sent you. All right.
Exactly. That won't do you much. Tell them Jerry sent you and you might do a bit better.
Yeah. Quick word from our mates at Bike Exchange and then we'll wrap up.
Look at this bike. You think it's just a bike, right? But it's not. It's a bike 374 people are looking at. This guy, this girl, them, all looking at it. People from here, there, and wherever this is. People that are looking for a bike. or just a piece of it. Amateurs, semi-amateurs, and pro-amateurs. This guy wants this bike, but with this crank and these bars. This could be the perfect match. But not this one. This girl has a bike to sell, and thousands of people might purchase it. Eyes on Bikes help grow small businesses. His, hers, yours, and the latest data and insights help those businesses keep moving. We are the world's #1 bike marketplace, with over 500,000 products and 900 brands, where buyers and sellers are brought together in a place where a bike is never just a bike. Bike Exchange, where the world buys, sells, learns, and rides.
Thanks to our mates at Bike Exchange.
Love that
just want to say massive thanks, Tracey, for coming on the show. It's been sensational because, as we said, we've had a lot of back and forth over the last couple of weeks, but most of the time we don't really know what we're talking about. To get a proper insight on some of the issues that the sport are facing, and the stance with the UCI has been really, really good. So really appreciate it. What do you want to finish off with, mate?
I just want to thank Tracey very much for coming on, and just say that the roles are reversed now. I can't say that I've taught you everything because you're teaching me so much. So fantastic, Dale. And I went to Dale in. Sorry about the Dale.
Great to be on, guys, and certainly as hopefully for viewers, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, and if there's one thing that this year has shown is the collective effort to keep the sport alive and thriving. It's one of the few sports around the world that's been able to host its major events in the world this year, and that's a pretty amazing thing. And we actually thank particularly those who've continued to invest in the sport, the riders for staying focused all year. Dan, you talked about riders being tired at the back end of the year. A lot of that's the exhaustion of the unknown, spending all winter, all summer training, not knowing when they're going to start. I'd say quietly they'd all be pretty delighted that they've been able to race for even a few months this year, let alone not at all. And I know they'll be looking forward to a break, and let's hope that they can be starting again January in Australia as per the plan should be.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And as we said, we really appreciate you coming on, Tracey. We'll get you back on another time, and we'll just share fun stories and have a good laugh, and hopefully the doom and gloom all starts to clear up, and particularly with this COVID.
Just to let all the fans know that it was great to hear some of those stories about Gracie Elvin. Evidently, her last race is going to be what used to be the 3 days of the Punna, which is now a 2-day race, I think, but it's still called that. But that's going to be her final race, and then we're going to get her on to talk about her amazing and wonderful career.
Perfect. We're looking forward to that.
That's only a couple of days after the Flanders, so it's on the 20th of October is her very last race. I can't wait to hear that story, and she will be self-effacing, and then she'll be sending praises to everybody else. But I think if viewers want to tune in, that's going to be a voice from inside the peloton of the last 6 to 8 years. It's going to be an invaluable story.
Well, I'll give you a couple of days' notice because you know how I always prepare you for these things well in advance, Tracey. But we'd love you to jump on board and and have play a part in that, because it's going to be a wonderful night.
Absolutely love to, and I've known her since she was a young teenager, riding a mountain bike actually in Canberra, saying, "What should I do with my life?" Or stay on the bike, and the rest is history. She made it all happen herself, but with a lot of help along the way, and she'll be sending a lot of acknowledgements. So that'll be a lot of fun.
Oh, awesome. Looking forward to it. Johnny, you'll have to tell Dave Brailsford that don't worry about that night. We'll clear it out for Gracie.
Yeah. What about Luke Rowe? How's he going? Have you seen?
No, he's
still
just
asleep.
He's still asleep, mate. So Luke Rowe, we'll wake him up and we'll get him on the next couple of days. Thanks again, Tracey. We'll be back at normal time tomorrow night because footy finals aren't on 7:30 straight Eastern Standard Time. And Johnny will no doubt line up a super guest. So we'll see you then.